It's Wrestling Observer Radio. Garrett and Dave here. Dave, are you still getting any blowback from the show that we did last weekend with Tony Khan?
No, I'm not. I haven't in a couple days. It was crazy though. The first day or two afterwards was it was comedic. It was hilarious, actually. But
the thing that I compared it to was like, okay, if obviously these are your reader awards, they're a very important award, not only to you but to your subscribers and to people who follow wrestling. But it's like if some famous actor won a Golden Globe, and then the Golden Globes podcast was like, oh no, why would we want to have Brad Pitt on the podcast? Like, we're kissing up to Brad. Like, what? Like, it's so silly to me. Like, we take these awards seriously. Subscribers do, and obviously
they must.
Tony Khan,
and Tony Khan takes seriously.
Took it so seriously. Like, to him, they meant the world. To just knowing that the fan base, the newsletter that he grew up reading, that he still reads, he takes those awards seriously. So, like, man, like, I guess you're not supposed to take your own awards seriously, and you're supposed to big time the whole thing.
Well, the thing is that Vince McMahon and WWE have created a world completely different from any other sport or entertainment. But there's so many people who know nothing about sports or entertainment and journalism, and somehow they think that, like, there should be, no interaction, you know what I mean? And no, like, you shouldn't be talking about it. It's wrong, or it's kissing ass, or whatever it is, when there's no other business where that mentality would exist. Where, like you said, like if it was entertainment or sports, somebody wins the MVP award or whatever, it's not like, the guy would not do an interview to talk about it or whatever, or it'd be wrong to tweet or to thank the ones that were the funniest to me. It wasn't so much like the show, because I thought the show was really good, but the things that I thought were the funniest, but also the saddest in the same way, because it reflected on the people who wrote it, is that, like, people who thanked the people who voted for them, and including some people who didn't win, who thanked the people voting for them. And then there's all these people getting mad at them for doing that, where it was kind of like, why would you get mad at someone for thanking people for voting for them to win an award? And in many of the cases with many of the people, there's no other equivalent awards. I mean, like, yes, lots and lots of people do Match of the Year awards, okay? And some other people probably do Wrestler of the Year awards. There's probably, 4 or 5 of them. But in a lot of the other categories, we're the only ones that do any kind of major awards like that. So it's the one, and it's the one for, for a lot of different people. And, whether, and what, yet at the same time, I mean, it isn't that far removed that Mauro Ranallo thanked everyone for voting for him for Announcer of the Year a couple of years ago. And, he had the frickin' company, basically do a hit piece on him on one of their shows because he did that. And it's just like, that wasn't his, being, that really told something about the mentality of the people there, and it's like, it is different, but it's like, because the WWE in its own weird way is different. It's like when other people aren't. I mean, 15 years ago, I mean, and people didn't see this, but when Noah was winning a lot of awards, during the Kobashi era, since 2003, 2005, on their shows after the awards came out, on their network television show, I mean, they would bring up the awards on television, which AEW didn't even really do, although they did have that plaque. So I guess didn't
they have a banner?
Yeah, they had that banner thing up there about winning Best TV Show 2019, 2020. But, I mean, Noah just like had a thing at the end of the show where it's like, we won these awards, so, and if Impact or whatever, if I was Ring of Honor or Impact, I would absolutely freaking, publicize to high heaven any awards I win, because it just why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? You know what I'm saying? It would make no sense not to. But in some people's eyes, I don't know. They.
Do you think some people, at least older fans, equate it to when NWA or WCW would use the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Awards in storyline, like?
Well, they would always publicize winning because they would get the stuff put on television, Crockett Promotions and everything. And WWE didn't do that because, they didn't want to acknowledge it. That's just how they are. But Crockett Promotions did, and Mid-South did, absolutely. Not so much on television, Mid-South, but Crockett Promotions would like Dusty Rhodes Most Popular and, Road Warriors Tag Team of the Year and all that. Yeah, they would do that.
Well, I'm going to start off the show with sad news, and we'll get through other news that is not as sad. But I saw that Buddy Colt had passed away.
Yeah, I had seen Buddy Colt in the 70s in Florida before he had the plane accident that ended his career, and he was a very good main event heel. Like, he had the aura, the sneer. Promo, like, good. I wouldn't say great work. Pretty damn good. Pretty solid main event worker. And he was around and pushed as one of the key guys in like a real heyday, maybe even the hottest period of that promotion, because he was there like 73, 74. And the same in Georgia. He was a big enough star that in 72, when they, basically folded the Georgia, the old Georgia was ABC Booking, I think, and then, folded that and started up Georgia Championship Wrestling, with, trying to get Ann Gunkel out and that whole story. That one of the things Eddie Graham did was he wanted to make sure, because of the wrestling war, that the top talent would get shares in the company, so they wouldn't jump, and they would continue to come to Georgia because they would be part owners. And that's how Jack Briscoe got the stock that ended up being sold to Vince McMahon, as a matter, which changed the face of wrestling for a while.
Backfired.
Yeah, but when. But Buddy Colt was one of those guys. There were only a few. I think it was Jack Briscoe and Buddy Colt, and they might have been. It's possible. Watts definitely had stock. I don't know if he got it right away, but I think Watts would have been another one, and maybe those were the only ones, because Wrestling 2 didn't have any stock in the company, but they didn't know how big he was gonna be. Whereas Jack Briscoe was, at that time, like one of the biggest stars in, 72. He was, going to be the world champion. It was just, he was going to win the world championship the next year, and everybody knew it. So having the world champion always come to Atlanta because it's part owner, would help them greatly in the wrestling war. And then Buddy Colt was obviously, in Tim Woods, were established stars in the Georgia region, and they just wanted to make sure that, a lot of those guys, because Dusty didn't even get stock, and Dusty didn't really take off until, he was a big star, but Dusty took off in 74, and this was late 72. And, but the idea is that for Atlanta and the Omni, there wasn't even an Omni. It was actually just the City Auditorium. The Omni came in the summer of 73. But the idea is these guys would work all week in Florida, but because they had stock, they would, Friday night, they would go to Atlanta rather than Tallahassee or Fort Lauderdale, which is where the Florida promotion would run, because they were, co-owners, and because they really, Atlanta was the key city in the wrestling war. He was the pilot of the plane that crashed when Bobby Shane died and Gary Hart was all messed up, and Mike McCord, who became Austin Idol, he made pretty much a full recovery, and was actually a much, much bigger star afterwards than he was before. Gary Hart, it hurt his mobility greatly, but he had, he was mostly a talker and a sinister looking guy. So it hurt him from, in a sense, but he still had, many, many, many years in the business afterwards. And Buddy Colt was just hurt so badly he could not perform. He did do whatever it was, 3 matches or so when he tried, and he realized he just couldn't do it. And he worked for years. He was Gordon Soley's co-host, and I think he probably helped with booking. And he worked in real estate, and that was the main stuff. And I don't know a lot about him personally. I know he got Brian Blair started in wrestling, but he started as Cowboy Ron Reed and was not a big star early on. He was a bodybuilder, did judo in the Marines, and pretty tough guy. And then in '69, probably maybe even '68, he bleached his hair as Ron Reed, and then he changed his name to Buddy Colt, which might have been in Amarillo, but I could, that's in '69, but I could be off on that because I haven't really studied it. But when I started watching, I think that he was really big in Georgia, and then he came to Florida and was a main event guy there, and I saw him live. Many times. And like I said, he was a main event heel type of level guy, in the sense of, I know a lot of people said he could have been world champion, and it's possible, but he, when the plane crash came, he was already 39, and he wasn't as versatile, and he wasn't as good as Harley Race was. He was not nearly as colorful as Ric Flair was, and by the time Rick got it, he would have been 45, so he would have aged out of really that. So I don't really think that he really could have been world champion. He had an aura, it was like, to me, he wasn't like blow away, greatest heel I ever saw or anything like that. He was definitely trying to copy Buddy Rogers, and but he was very effective, and absolutely a good worker, so the matches, like when he would work, his matches, like, I wouldn't say when I would go to the cards that his matches were the best match on the card, because they were so loaded with good workers. When you had the Jack Briscoe and Jerry Briscoe and Morocco and the Hollywood Blondes and those guys that were there at the time. I remember seeing him with Danny Hodge. They had a hell of a match. It was really good. So, he would have, one of the better matches on the show. And like I said, like a very, I would compare him in a lot of ways to Bockwinkel. I think Bockwinkel was obviously a better talker and maybe a slightly better worker, but similar. In the sense that, they had that really good look, really good aura, absolute main event. Like they were absolute main eventers. They were not, it wasn't like a guy who's marginal they pushed to be a main eventer. He was the real deal at that level.
So he was 85?
85, yeah, because he was 39 when he got in the crash in 75. It was him, Gary Hart, Bobby Shane, who died in the crash. One of the famous stories was they were in Jacksonville the next night, and they announced, Bobby Shane obviously was not on the card, and they announced that there was a plane crash, and they're all heels, and they said Bobby Shane died, and the place popped. Everybody cheered.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because that's how bad it was in those days. And I know a lot of wrestlers that were on that show, when they heard that reaction, it gave them a very negative feeling about wrestling fans, both the baby faces and the heels. I remember that was one of those things where that story of they announced Bobby Shane dying and people cheering, that really gave a lot of wrestlers real negative feelings on the wrestling fans, which, if I was, it would to me too. It's a different era and it's different fans. That would never happen. That would never happen today, but it did happen then. And some people try to justify it. Well, Bobby Shane was such a great heel that when they said he died, everybody cheered. But fuck that. That's ridiculous. It's not such a great heel. It really says something about the fans at that time, and they were, and it probably wasn't every fan cheering. You know what I mean? It was probably most fans probably quiet and sad, or many, and then you hear the cheering from the nutty fans, but there were not enough of them. But that was a real famous story that Thursday night in Jacksonville.
So you're going to have another bio to write, and you wrote, there was like 4 of them in this Observer this week.
This issue was so hard. But it was interesting. Dean Ho was an interesting character. I knew a little bit about him. I knew most of the stuff about Art Mahalik. And I got to write about the Leo Nomalini Luthez angle, which is, was really, really big here. And Jim Crockett, of course. That was hard. That was hard because I wrote it all on Thursday, and that was the day that I was supposed to devote to watching Stardom and Budokan, and I still haven't watched Budokan yet. I did watch Stardom, and but it was hard. Jim Crockett was a super major figure in wrestling, and probably. He was a big time figure. Dean Ho was a big baby face here. I wasn't like that. Like when he was here, as far as being top baby face, he didn't come off to me as a top baby face, but he was the top baby face because we were lacking talent. But it did work. He did draw it decently well, and at times really good. When they broke the ukulele and he went after Smirnoff, they really had 12,000 people at the Cow Palace, which is, for a normal non-battle royal show, was a really great crowd. And him and Buddy Rose, I remember him in Morocco. I remember him in Morocco the best. I think that was like the hottest feud that he had. Him and Smirnoff drew the best. Mahalik I saw as a kid. He was older then, and they used to call him like the former 49er great. And, he was a star in the first season, his rookie year. He had a great rookie year with the 49ers, and then he got hurt. Did you see the stats, his place kicking stats?
No.
Yeah, he was the place kicker for one season with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he connected on 1 of 13 field goals and 9 of 15 extra points.
Oh my God.
So he must have been like one of the worst place kickers in the history of the NFL. I saw those stats, and he was originally a lineman, defensive lineman, and as a wrestler in college, he was a good enough college wrestler that the Olympic coaches, in 51, he took 3rd in the AAU Nationals as a heavyweight. And 52 is the Olympic year. And they were trying, and he was a wrestler secondarily. Football was his sport. So the wrestling people were going like, look, if you devoted a year to this stuff, you could you could make the Olympic team. But he got drafted by the 49ers, so he and then he got drafted into the service, so it just never happened. He didn't go for the Olympics, but he'd already decided he wasn't going to try. He wasn't going to pursue wrestling, amateur wrestling, and go for the Olympics. He was going to do football. Then he got drafted, and then he after he served in I guess in the 50s, after he served his service, the 49ers actually, what happened was he was supposed to be discharged like mid to late 1953 football season. But I guess the 49ers had pull, and they were able to get him out of the service in July so he could go to camp. And then he was the starter, on the team. And that's where, from that year, the 53 season, after he was second team All-Pro, and the 49ers that year were second, and there were 2 conferences then. There was the Eastern and the Western. They were second in the Western Conference. So they were like maybe, one of the best teams in the league. Not the Browns and the Lions were the two best teams. So maybe they were the third or fourth best team in the league. But, they were a relatively new franchise, and it was a very successful year for the team. And when the football season ended, because Leo Nomalini had already become such a big draw as a wrestler, and he had the wrestling background because he was a legitimate wrestler. Joe Malkowitz, who was the promoter here, he, talked to Mahalik about also being a wrestler. So him and Nomalini between the 53 and 54 football season, they were a regular tag team, even though Nomalini did a lot of singles, and they were going for the World Tag Team Championship during the season, during the off season and everything. And he got a pretty good push and was pushed, the next couple of off seasons when he wrestled up here, even after he got traded to the Steelers, he would come back here and wrestle and do pretty well. And he ended up wrestling. Ricky Dozan was there the first year he was, when him and Nomalini were working on top. Ricky Dozan was one of the top baby faces before Ricky Dozan went back to Japan. So Ricky Dozan actually never got Art to Japan until 62, but when he brought him there, it was like NFL star, and he was very well protected. So then later, he would go to Japan during the summer because he was a high school teacher and a football coach, so he had the summer off. So he'd go to the summer every other year to Japan, and was, he did well. It wasn't like he was a superstar, but he did well. And then he wrestled mostly Southern California because he was coaching in Orange County, different schools, and but he would come up here sometimes in the summer as well, or sometimes he would be brought up for Cow Palace shows, for Saturday night Cow Palace shows during the school year outside of football season. Because he had a little bit of a name. And when I saw him, he was over 40, and he was just a guy who was like a former star. He was basically an enhancement guy. But they would use him to put over, young guys. That was his role. And I don't remember him, again, he's in his 40s when I saw him, and I don't remember him being anything that blew me away or anything like that. But like the older fans would, they knew who he was. He had credibility with the older audience. With the younger audience, it's really fun. It's funny because today the guys from like 20 years ago are like such big stars and revered and everything. And back then, because so much of the audience was so much younger, it's like I think about the idea of bringing in some guys from 25 years ago, like AEW, which is like loaded with all these guys from the late, like Arn Anderson's heydays, the mid 80s. It's 35 years ago, or Jake, which would be the 80s. And, when I was a kid, if you go back 35 years, that's 1935. That'd be like bringing in frickin' Londos or Dano O'Mahony or Shikot or some of these guys that we wouldn't have related to whatsoever. You know what I mean? If they had brought those guys out on TV, nobody would have cared. They were long, long gone. So it's just but again, like you didn't have the main promoter, Tony's in his late 30s, but Vince is in his mid 70s. But yeah, just going back to, like when Mahalik was there, he was a former main eventer and he was a legitimate, second team all pro football player. And it wasn't, it wasn't a big deal. He was just a journeyman guy who was a football, a high school football coach who would come in and do jobs for guys on the way up. That was what I saw him at.
The year that he would have been a rookie with the 49ers is the year before they had the famous $1 million backfield with Tittle and McElhaney and John Henry Johnson and Joe the Jet. So that's the time frame of talking about the team.
I think he played with Joe the Jet and Hugh McElhaney, didn't he?
He would have been, yes. He would have been there 53, 54. But I don't think John Henry Johnson joined as the $1 million backfield until 54.
Okay. Well, he was on the 49er team in 54 too. But
yeah, he played like 2 games or something.
Right. He tore up his knee against the Rams and didn't play the rest of the season. He tore his ACL, and then he got traded to the Steelers because the doctors of the 49ers thought he was done, and he didn't think he was done, so they sent him to the Steelers. And he wasn't the same at all. He played 2 years with the Steelers, but he never started or anything like that. So it probably, it definitely affected him badly. But
and that's probably why he was a terrible kicker, because he had a bad knee.
Can you imagine? You got tore ACL and I think he punted too, but I'm not sure. Like when I was looking up stats, I saw his place kicking stats and I knew that he was a place kicker, but there's something in my head that said he punted as well that I would remember from my childhood. But I didn't see any punting stats, so I don't know 100% that's true. But I just remember as a kid, looking that stuff up and that he had punted. I don't think he punted for the 49ers, but I think he did for the Steelers. But
Pro Football Reference has him as a place kicker, but not a punter.
Right.
1955 with the Steelers.
55, yeah. Right. That was the year he was a terrible place kicker, yeah. But he, like the famous game where he, injured Otto Graham, who ended up coming back anyway. And Otto Graham was like the biggest, the star quarterback in the whole league on the Browns, who were the dominant team of the era. Wyatt Tittle was the quarterback for the 49ers at that time, in that game. And because I remember Hugh McElhaney was there, and Nomalini, of course, was like, the big star lineman, played both ways, and all pro on offense and defense and everything like that. He was, Mr. 49ers and everything. But even like Leo, so Leo was the figurehead promoter for Vern Gagne. So this would be here from 81 through maybe 87, 88, when they finally just couldn't come here anymore because they were drawing so poorly. But because Leo Nomalini and Gagne were teammates at the University of Minnesota, and Nomalini, the story of Nomalini, if somebody ever wrote I wrote a big article on him when he died in 2000 or whatever year it was he died. But Leo Nomalini is one of the most fascinating athletic stories of like almost like a Danny Hodge. In the sense of, just it's almost like a movie should be done about him. Because it's like, 6'3", 260 pound. Okay, he never played high school football. They said he never even played football like in the like with his buddies because his parents didn't believe in sports. So he never plays high school football. He goes into the service, and he's 6'3", 260, and he's incredibly fast. So in a year, he's like just killing everybody on the football field in the, whatever it is, El Toro Marine team or whatever it was that he played with. And Gagne was on the team. So, and Gagne was a great high school football player, a great high school wrestler, and went to the University of Minnesota and told the coaches, and they got him a scholarship, and he came to the University of Minnesota. And, one of the all-time great college football players. But he Nomalini's like, he never played football till he's like 18 years old, plays in college, college football Hall of Famer and all that, and All-American, 3-sport, never played sports. And he's a 3-sport, star in college because he's so senior year. Now he never wrestled in high school. He never wrestled in college. But on the football field, he was so tough that in his senior year, I believe it was his senior year, Gagne decided to drop from heavyweight to 191 because he was trying to go for the Olympics, I believe. But whatever it was, Gagne dropped from heavyweight. And so they talked Leo into being heavyweight because they had no stud heavyweight. And Leo went 16-1 with no wrestling at the Division I level at the University of Minnesota. And his only loss was to Bill Miller, who ended up being a Hall of Fame pro wrestler. And that was, by a decision. He didn't go to the NCAA tournament because track was so much of a bigger sport at that time than wrestling was. So the track season overlapped like the NCAA tournament. So he did the Big Ten tournament where he took second. And then instead of going to the NCAA tournament, he started the track season because they needed him in track. And track was a higher profile sport. And in track, he placed in the discus, and he was the fastest guy on the track team at the University of Minnesota. He ran the 100. He was the 440. What's it called? What's the term? The guy, the anchor man. He was the anchor man on the 440 relay, ran the 100, did the shot, did the discus, was good at everything. Then he plays pro football both ways. Pro wrestling, goes to pro wrestling, does great there. Never lifted a weight. Bockwinkel used to tell me when he was a kid, because Bockwinkel grew up here in San Francisco. Bockwinkel and I'm trying to remember the story. So Bockwinkel, how old is John Madden?
God, he's got to be 80.
Okay, so
I'll look it up.
Okay. So because I think Bockwinkel either
84.
I think 84. So he was born in what year?
1936.
Okay, right. So Bockwinkel was born in 34. So they were contemporaries. So they were buddies, and they were football rivals. I don't think they were on the same team. I think that they were on rival teams. But he would tell me about, John Madden as a football player in growing up in San Francisco. So Bockwinkel, because his father was a wrestler, would go to all the matches. And he said that, like, when I was a kid watching like the Sharp brothers, Killer Kowalski and Nomalini, it was like they were like gods to me, because they were like these huge, the Sharp brothers were like stud athletes and weightlifters and had the great bodies, and Kowalski had the great body, and Leo never lifted weights, but he was like 6'3", 260 before guys did steroids, and was super strong and had a great body. And he goes like, these were just like you'd see these monstrous, the Sharp brothers like 6'5", 6'6", Kowalski 6'7", Leo 6'3", and he goes, these monstrous big guys with the good bodies, and it's like that was like his and tough and whatever. But he would tell me, he's like, watching those four guys, like that got him into being like wanting to be a wrestler. But like they did a thing, because in those days the football players didn't lift weights, but they had one year they had this thing, I don't even know what it was, that it was a machine that the 49ers had, and they plugged it into you put it against the wall, and it's probably like like a pull machine, kind of like a lat machine would be now, but it's seated, it was a seated kind of slant overhead thing, so it's like it's not weights, but it really was weights, so it was okay. So they had the football players do it, and Leo, who's never lifted weights, pulled the whole thing off of the wall and like destroyed the machine. So I just remember that story. That, and
Rock should take that story for young Rock.
I know, really. I know he should have whatever.
So are you excited for UFC show later today?
Yeah, I'm super excited for the UFC show.
It's gonna be a long
the main
one.
event. Yeah, well, I'm not going to watch the whole show, but I'll watch.
I'm only watching the pay-per-view, but still,
I'm watching the Dominic Cruz is on the prelims, so I'm watching that for sure.
He's in the prelims.
So I'm gonna watch probably. I'm saying 10 of the 15 fights, but Jake Matthews is in the early prelims, and I'm a fan of his. So I don't know. I'll watch a lot of the show tomorrow, but yeah, the main event is the whole main card's great, but I'm not so into the Amanda Nunes and Megan Anderson fight. I really think Nunes is going to smash her, but Peter Yan and Aljamain Sterling is interesting to me. I think
it's almost a pick'em.
Are the odds that close?
No, I don't think the odds. I think it's like Yan is like minus 110 or something.
Well, that's close.
But and to me, like I have no idea who's going to win this fight, and I guess that makes it great.
Yeah. They both have reasons that they could win. I mean, if Aljamain can get him on the ground, he can beat him. Absolutely can beat him. Standing, I don't think he can beat him. But yeah, it's a big one. And then Blachowicz and Adesanya is just so intriguing. It's one of the most intriguing fights. So Adesanya, what do you weigh? 200.5. Mm-hmm. Because I had heard a couple days ago that he was 198, so he wasn't like, and Blachowicz is going in there at 230, easily 230. So that's a lot of size that you're giving up, and Blachowicz is a hard hitter. That's the one thing. But Adesanya, is a absolutely fantastic fighter. So yeah, it's boy, that Blachowicz is 38. That plays a part too. Blachowicz is a good submission guy, hits hard. When he cracks middleweights, he hurts them. But Adesanya is so gifted as a fighter and so skilled. I think most people think Adesanya is going to win. And a lot of fighters think that Blachowicz is going to win, but it's really interesting. I don't know how exciting it'll be. Like Jan and Sterling Aljamain, I think as long as that fight goes, it'll be very exciting. Blachowicz and Adesanya. I mean, Adesanya has had some very exciting fights. I think it'll be an exciting fight too, but it's more intriguing to me than like, it's going to be fireworks. I don't know about it for fireworks. I just think that, Blachowicz has to just use his size and keep it cramped and not stay at a distance, because at a distance, he's giving up too much speed and skill.
The odds for Jan and Sterling look to be either both at -110 or
so that's pick 'em. Wow.
Or one at -110 and Sterling at -120. I've seen both, but those will change, or maybe not. But there's you can bet up until the second of the fight.
From a gambling standpoint, I think that Jan's going to win. But the interesting thing to me is that Aljo absolutely has a good chance of winning if he can get the thing on the ground and choke him out. But if I think, because Jan has looked like a monster for the most part, whereas Sterling's up and down. I mean, he's had great fights, but he's also had fights that he hasn't looked so great in. So I think just based on that, Jan should be the favorite. But the way they match up, I can definitely see where people would bet on Sterling.
The Blachowicz fight, the old saying in boxing was great big man beats the great little man. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to think of what would you consider to be the MMA comparison previous to this fight? Like what's the fight that you would think of when it comes to someone who's, is probably going to be 25 pounds larger than the other guy in the cage?
A lot of the heavyweight fights,
like they're Randy Couture and
Tim Sylvia. Yeah, Randy Couture and Brock Lesnar, Cain Velasquez and Brock Lesnar. I'm trying to think of what other small heavyweights have done well. There's a Fedor. Fedor was a small heavyweight.
What about a small, like Adesanya is not this giant middleweight.
He's a good size middleweight.
Yeah,
he's light heavyweight. He's a good size light heavyweight, and Adesanya is not a big middleweight. Because a big middleweight would be a guy walking around at 210, and he's walking around at 200. And that's a 20-pound, and Blachowicz cuts hard for 205. And Adesanya didn't cut hard for 185. So it's more like it's a 20-pound difference in weight divisions, but it's probably a 30-pound difference in real size. And that's a lot at that weight. It's not, I mean, there's Adesanya definitely has his advantages, though.
Yeah, I mean, the Blachowicz story is just an amazing story, considering where he was a few years ago and just the run that he's been on.
Yeah, because he's in his 30s and he's not a contender or anything, and then all of a sudden, it just clicks for him, and he's he's beaten some really good people and looked really good beating them, both on the ground and standing.
Yeah, yeah. So
I mean, the thing is on the ground. I think that he is way better than Adesanya, but and then maybe he's big enough to get it there.
Yeah, this is so intriguing. Yeah, and that's why you make fights like this, is because they're, there's all kinds of ways that people are thinking how they could go, and it's going to be fun tomorrow.
I wonder
fun on Saturday.
I wonder how it's going to do, because usually you draw based on the main event, not on the depth of the card. This card's got incredible depth. And Adesanya is a good draw. Blachowicz is not a big draw. But I wonder if the intrigue of everything will make it, or just the fact that, if you're a fan, like this is the, like there's UFCs to skip and then there's UFCs not to skip. And this is so clearly.
Last month was the one to skip.
Last week too. But yeah, last month's pay-per-view was nothing. But this one is like so much like the card you don't want to miss, just because you got 3 championship fights, which is a very rare thing. But this is going to be, this is an 8-hour show? No, 7-hour show. 7-hour show, which is too long. 7-hour show with 3 5-rounders. So it could go way over 7 hours. Mm-hmm. If those 3 fights go the distance, that's going to be that thing will probably end at like close to, if they all go 5, they could easily go to around 2 a.m. Eastern time. This could be a long freaking show, between everything, and I don't care what, there is no there's no reason that anyone can give me that a show should ever go over 6 hours, and 6 hours is pushing it. but 7 hours, I don't care. I don't care if it's like, New Japan at the Tokyo Dome. 5 hours is okay. 7 hours, no. Nobody should ever go 7 hours for a show.
I'm going to do an experiment on the post-game show. So just quick plug for the experiment. There's this app called Locker Room. And you remember when we were talking to the other Dave Meltzer, and he was talking about the app Clubhouse, which he likes to go on, and he records a show via that app.
That Levesque and Stephanie went on Clubhouse recently? Yeah.
They did. And so Locker Room is very similar to Clubhouse, but it's more sports focused. So we're going to do a show post UFC. And so if people are into that thing and they're into the tech, the Locker Room app, it's only for iPhones. But if you want to jump on, like, we're going to make it interactive. We'll put people through, and people can talk and stuff. But so tomorrow is or Saturday is kind of like the test show for me, because I also want to do it for the post AEW pay-per-view. So I'll be on both nights doing like probably an hour or so show. So if you enjoy new technology, download Locker Room and follow me, and I'm sure you'll get some sort of notification when we go live. But okay, so let's pivot back to wrestling. In the Observer, there was a story about TakeOver WrestleMania week being the Wednesday night show being a takeover, and then the next night coming back with a second takeover on Thursday night. That's that week. You're talking about UFC shows being long. Like, that week is like so much stuff.
But they always do. But there's always
2 takeovers, though?
No, never 2 takeovers. But, it used to be with all the indie shows, and there's still some of them, but not as many as before. So the story I heard was that it would probably be from Full Sail, but then I've heard some talk that maybe they'll go to the stadium. I guess they'll probably announce that this week. Because I've heard the idea of maybe going to the stadium and having like 3,800 people for the two shows. And then maybe that also, and then if that was the case, you would go to the stadium for SmackDown and Raw, as well as the two WrestleManias, which would be 6 straight nights at Raymond James Stadium. If they do that, and they may not, I mean, because the original story I heard was that it would be at the NXT shows would be at the Performance Center, but we'll see. And yeah, and then they moved to Tuesday afterwards. So
yeah, that is that's like the last. They're going to go out with a bang, I guess, on that Wednesday night.
Yeah, that one they may do well with a TakeOver show on USA Network. That one might do real well because takeovers do have a great rep, and they always deliver. So that'll be a big night. That'll be a big week. Yeah, and that would be going out with a bang. Attempt to go out with a bang. Yeah, they started in Canada, and NXT got killed in Canada at least this week. But then again, this week, they figured to get killed with Shaq.
Speaking of Shaq, what did you learn about the ratings from Wednesday night? Not to open with Shaq?
Not to open with Shaq, yeah. Yeah, Shaq's the main event. They allowed people who only wanted to watch for Shaq to open the show and move on, whereas I think a lot of people would have watched the whole show and it would have gotten more exposure. And the other thing is that if they had gotten that number at 9:45 to 10, that leaves them with a giant lead-in for their the countdown show, which was excellent. That was a great countdown show, but it didn't do giant numbers. I mean, it had a good lead-in too, but it was the Matt Hardy match, so it didn't have anywhere close to the numbers of viewers of the Shaq match. But the thing with if you look at the rating for the Shaq match itself, as far as number of viewers, you can't be disappointed. But I was surprised at the nature of it because the show did poorly with women. I mean, it even women 35 to 49, NXT actually beat it. And that's, I'm not saying that never happens, but it usually doesn't happen. It did great with men, or I would say very good with men 18 to 49, and good with teenage guys, very weak with women across the board. Tremendous with over 50, the best that they've probably done with over 50. I don't know, maybe the first week they did better. I don't remember, but modern wise, they did way above what they usually do with over 50. So Shaq drew Shaq drew guys, and Shaq drew an older audience. The women, for whatever reason, weren't there, and maybe it was because of MTV, but who knows? But still, it was way down. And I won't blame him. I won't blame the MTV show, and the reason is because NXT women viewers were up, so the women viewers were there. They just, whatever it was, they were way down by AEW standards, and that's why the 18 to 49 number was average. And it should have been, I was stunned at the 18 to 49 number. I thought it would be so much higher. Overall number, if Shaq had been on last, the overall number would have been, well over 1 million. As it was in the 9s. I mean, it was the best of the year. So you can't go in there and go, overall number isn't good. It was the best number of the year. It's good. But I was stunned when I saw the chart, because I thought that AEW would be, I didn't think they'd be 1. I thought they would be 3, and they ended up being 6, and I thought that they would be 0.37, 0.40 in that range, and they were 0.33 in the demo. So they were lower than I expected, even with, and that's figuring in that the Shaq match was going first. I just thought people would stay. I don't think the Tully thing made, they pushed that really hard in social media, Tully wrestling. I don't think that really made a difference at all. The MJF and Chris Jericho press conference thing with the Young Bucks did very well. That did over 1 million viewers. So that was strong. And then the rest, the final, the women's tournament, it's like it was a really good match. But I think that the women that the fans don't know Ryo Mizunami. The fans don't know her other than the fans who watched watched the YouTube stuff. And Nyla Rose, has been on. They know who she is. But I would say that, like, if you're talking about the women that mean the most, if it was a ratings thing, my gut would tell me that would be Riho, Thunder Rosa, Britt Baker, and Shida would be the ones that would matter the most. Maybe Serena, maybe, but I would say for sure Britt. Those the other ones I said. So you didn't really have. Not whatever. It's like the whole idea is I think that they think that Mizunami and Shida are going to kill it on Sunday, and they may very well. So that's the idea of where they were going with it. But it wasn't a women's match that was, going to pop a big number, and then 10 and Max Caster. It's like that match. They weren't ready for being that late in the show. They haven't been pushed as neither's been pushed as singles guys. They both have talent. But it, and so it at the end it wasn't that big, but they still had a big edge over Roderick Strong against Finn Balor, which was a super match. That I thought in viewers, not 1849, but I thought in viewers that Roderick Strong and Balor going against that Matt Hardy and Mark Quinn against Adam Page and John Silver match, I thought that would be very competitive in total viewers, and it was not. It was a huge advantage for AEW. So that surprised me as well. The Shaq number didn't surprise me, but I would have hoped that they would have maintained more of that the rest of the show, but they didn't in the second hour. The first hour was a real good show though. So it's what it is.
The only information I have is I texted both of my kids who are in their early 20s about Shaq. They never even got back to me. My buddies who were my age, they were kind of intrigued. And my stepkids who were like 11, one of them kind of was peeking over my shoulder with intrigue when Shaq went through the table. But it didn't sound like Shaq to those four kids was that interesting, which is weird to me because my kids are basketball fans. But again, by the time
are they basketball fans of Shaq?
Well, by the time they were watching basketball, Shaq was right at the end of his career. So they see him on TNT and that TV show, but
he's on. He is a celebrity. So,
but to me, it was a giant thing. Like I was kind of sad because I didn't think the promotion was very good of the whole thing, and
they did a pretty good job. On television, I thought that it could have been better. The last day, I think it was pretty good, but it didn't reach the Google search number was not high at all. It didn't even make the top 20. And I thought that would. What I could tell you from friends is that I got text messages from friends who watched it and thought that it was fun. My son was certainly aware of it, but I don't know that he watched it. I had friends who that don't watch wrestling who did watch it and, like I said, liked it, but they didn't watch the whole show. They only watched that. And it did not get on SportsCenter, which I thought the table break certainly at least a shot at getting on. I mean, they did the right thing. I mean, as far as what they did in the match, I thought the match itself, considering who was in it, was, I mean, I give all the credit in the world whoever laid that thing out in QT for training them. I thought it was great for if you consider everything, you know, that two of them are in their first match ever. One of them is not even, you know, trained that much. You had Cody Rhodes, who obviously directed everything, and then Red Velvet, who clearly is got a lot of potential, as does Jade, but is also still very inexperienced. You know, basically a rookie. You know, I thought, like, when you consider all that, I thought that it came off tremendous.
Very entertaining. Yeah. I was entertained throughout. I was happy because I was a little worried with the lack of experience in that match, but Shaq was awesome. He was like, he worked like a big man, and we don't really see that too much in wrestling today. So that kind of stood out as,
that's
pretty
a lot
fun.
of that. I mean, I think Cody did a great job with Shaq, but Shaq, yeah, considering everything, Shaq was considering experience and everything. I thought Shaq did really well. You know, Jade certainly has incredible potential to be a women wrestler. You know, I mean, she's got a look and she's got an athletic ability that's, you know, a way higher level. I mean, that's one thing I think that we may be seeing in the next 10 years is the elevation of American women wrestling, because we've never really had, like, you know, aside from Ronda Rousey, we've never really had, like, we've had, like, some of the women have, like, you know, they were played high school sports, but we've never really had, like, what I would call high level women athletes go into wrestling as compared to where some of these guys were really are, you know, that are in wrestling are really tremendous athletes, you know, all American wrestlers, football players, blah, blah, blah. With the women, you know, I mean, like, none, like the woman in the, what's her name? I forgot her name. The woman in the Cameron Grimes skit from a couple weeks ago, who was a legitimate, you know, college basketball star. Like, she's like a different level of athlete. You know, Bianca Belair is a very good athlete. But we haven't had that level of athlete with the women. And I think that as WWE and AEW to a degree, you know, and that's the thing with years ago, and it's not the case now, but years ago with Japan in the 90s, you had that level of female athletes going into women's wrestling. And that's why that early 90s period, you know, with the Manami Toyota and Kyoko Inoue and all that, Aja Kong, like, that era was so great because you had, like, you know, not just great training and not just a lot of, you know, shows so you can get experience and understand the psychology and all that, and you're on television and good TV time and all that, but you had great athletes. And I think that you will start to see, because there's money in it, there's some fame in it. It's not just about, you know, parading around in you know, your bra and panties, as these women, the Bayley women, grew up with, but still liked it. Like, the women now, you know, they're more, you know, it's so much less sleazy, I guess is the word, and so much less demeaning, for sure. So I think that you're going to start seeing, like, you know, your basketball players and your volleyball players that are the high level women athletes, track athletes and stuff. Some of them will probably come into this, and I think that the level of women wrestlers, I think that the work level of women wrestlers in the United States 10 years from now will be really, really higher than it is now. Not that it isn't much better now than it was 10 years ago. It's way, way better than it was 10 years ago. But I think that we'll have another exponential growth in that coming up.
Quickly, I noticed the NXT number for younger viewers was actually up. What do you think is the reason for that?
I don't know, because I thought they were going to get destroyed. I think it was the Shayna and Nia Jax match with Raquel Gonzalez and Dakota Kai, because it's still a WWE championship match, and main roster coming down always helps NXT. So I think that's what it was. But Yeah, it was. I thought they were going to get killed in 18. I thought the gap in 18 to 49 was going to be gigantic, and it was not. I mean, it was. The funny thing is the gap in viewers was higher than usual, because the one thing I didn't expect is that the NXT always does so well over 50, and they got, they did way worse over 50 than usual, which is why their total number was lower, even though their demo number was higher. And conversely, AEW did great over 50. So, yeah, a lot of surprises, I would say, on the Wednesday night number to me overall. Yeah.
All right. What is going on with the leg slapping story? I think a lot of people got a kick out of it when they read in The Observer today, and I saw it around other conversations around it. But I was surprised to read about leg slapping in The Observer, to say the least.
I thought it was like hilarious, because the thing, like, I guess like as a weird controversy, it was probably like Randy Orton and Tommaso Ciampa from months and months ago when they got into that thing. And I mean, of all the things, like hypocritical, it's like Randy Orton did that punt and slapped his leg every freaking time he did that punt when it was his finishing move. But it's a weird thing, because it's like almost like the old school guys. I remember like old school guys just getting so mad about leg slapping, and it was like, you guys all would stomp your foot when you threw a punch. It's the same goddamn thing. And then like Wrestling 2 would do the knee lift, and he would just slap the guy on the back when he connected with the knee as hard as he could. It was like, I mean, that, and like Wrestling 2's like, and as far as like the leg slapping, I mean, Chris Adams did that in England in the 70s, in the United States in the 80s. It's not like this is new, but whatever. It's one of those weird things that I don't know what, I guess because it's gotten over, and it's become a staple, and it is done way more frequently, but it's always been done. And now, for whatever reason, it's, how Vince goes these weird things, and this is his weird one. So tonight, just an example, where was it? Right outside the grill position tonight, and at Roswell, it says, there's a little sign that says, "Do not slap leg when kicking." So that's the instructions for the main roster. I don't know if they're going to find people, but there is absolutely a warning, and it's like, freaking Jey Uso. It's like, Jey Uso's a good worker. Why are you taking it away from him? It doesn't hurt anybody. I mean, I sometimes I think that like the minutia analysis of stuff that doesn't mean shit is done while the ignorance of the stuff that does mean shit is ignored in wrestling all the time. And I think this is the perfect example of that. It's like when fans watch, I watch as close as anybody, and I watch I've been PWG live, and again, that's a staple there. And nobody, these are the smartest fans in the country, and these are the most perceptive. They look harder and all this. And we all know, but it's like, it's not even an issue. So you think the average fan watching even thinks about this? Because they don't. And you're trying to do it because it's young guys doing it and it's getting over. It's almost like some old promoter going like, quit playing that music in the buildings, which is in fact happened constantly in the 80s. I used to hear it from, like, why are they playing that music? And it's like, because the fans enjoy it, and it makes the show more exciting. And eventually all sports are going to play music because that's cool. And they did, So I see this as like another example of just like, I don't know if it's jealous older guys or people like thinking there's a problem that doesn't exist, or, WWE just trying to keep guys from, or I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just, they think that that's an AEW thing and it's minor league or something. Who knows what's in their brains right now? But I
remember when you and Brian were talking about when WWE switched to HD, how people were going to find holes and they were going to have to work a lot more snug and stuff so that it didn't look not realistic. And I don't know, this is like, I feel like if you want to look for it, you could see it.
But you can
if
see
you don't
everything.
look for it, it doesn't really matter, except when it's really grotesque. And in certain situations over the history, there have been some grotesque ones, like the one that you wrote about in The Observer, where it was just a mistake, like it was, a habit or something. But I don't know, like it doesn't bother me. When I was a kid, I got such a kick out of it when I figured out why or how beautiful Bobby Eaton threw a punch and why it sounded so great when I slowed it down on the slow motion of my VCR. And then every time I threw a fake punch, that's exactly what I would do. I just thought it was cool.
He wasn't the only one doing it, but But Bobby Eaton was one of the great punchers.
It was awesome.
Bobby Eaton's one of the perfect example of how stupid this whole thing is, because essentially he did the exact same thing. And today, all those people who knock the guys today for doing this, if I go, well, Bobby Eaton, Shawn Michaels, Chris Adams, every freaking, Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson with the punches. You know what I mean? It's just what's been done forever. But it's almost a thing of like people trying to prove that modern wrestling is wrong and worse, and grasping at straws to prove it or something. I don't know. It's weird. Or, there's all kinds of problems in wrestling, and you could say it's done too much. I know people who think that, and I, look, a lot of things in wrestling are done too much. And the correct way to deal with that is that the public will eventually make it whatever, because what will happen is that it will stop getting a reaction, and when it does, people will do less of it and they will move to something that gets a reaction. So the normal, whatever it is of wrestling that changes, the natural evolution of wrestling will take it. But to stop something that is effective, so to speak, that's working, because of whatever reason, because it wasn't done as frequently, but it was still done over the course of history, is weird. Now, you could go in there and have agents and go like, look, we don't want 50 of these on a show. And that's right. So instead of like putting up a sign saying don't do it, go like, you can't do it because the main event guy's doing it. Okay. So you're not doing the main event guy's moves. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just classic psychology. There's nothing wrong with not doing it that way. I used to think that the other way was better. It was always, the way it was explained always made sense to me. But having been to shows where the opening match guys do the same thing as do a lot of the main eventer moves, and the main eventers still get the move over, made me think that perhaps what I was taught and what sounds logical in theory, in practice, is not the case. So therefore, it's like when we were young and we would go to Lucha Libre and all of the guys in the opening matches, no dives, no dives, no dives. Then finally you'd get these promoters who would just, and the younger guys wanted to dive, and the promoters would finally just go, let them do it. And we'd see these matches where, the opening matches would do dives and the main eventers do dives, and guess what? The main eventers still got over doing dives. So it was kind of like, wow, maybe we didn't have to hold back those opening match guys like we did in the past. But there's a theory, there's a theory of it. And if you're running a show and you want to run it that way, you're not wrong. There's both theories can work. So if that's your theory on everything, that's fine, and you want to limit it. But to eliminate it completely is nuts. To eliminate any move that gets over is nuts, because you're whatever the mentality is behind this, and I couldn't even tell you what it is because no one's explained it to me. Even though I've had people try to explain it to me, it's that's why wrestling's dying. And it's like, wrestling is the marginalization of the popularity of wrestling has to do a lot with society, and has to do with many, many factors, which include the lack of that transcendent star. it doesn't have to do with what's going on between the ropes, because it could be totally shitty. And if you got that star, it could be totally shitty between the ropes and it'll get over. And it could be absolutely fantastic. And you don't have that star and you're not going to draw big, because that is just, it's a star-driven business. It's not a work-driven business. Even though work is more important now than it's ever been in history, it is still not a work. Your star power is still more important than your working ability.
I would love to hear from somebody like Lance on, what he thinks. And I don't know if he would comment on it or not, but maybe he would. But, just somebody who's, in that system and training people, and like what his advice is on stuff like that. I'm super interested in stuff like that. But
well, I mean, I can't speak for Lance because I've never spoken to him on that specific super kick topic. But I would suspect that he would at least say that things done to excess over and over and over again lose their effectiveness, and that in time, in fact, is true. And when that happens, you pivot and move on. So, and again, you could certainly argue it's overdone, and I wouldn't argue that point. And if that's the case, instead of putting up a sign in the dressing room, I would just say, this is Jimmy Uso's move, this is Jey Uso's move, and they're on the card, so don't do it. And that's that.
All right, well, that'll be it for us. So you and Brian will be back after the UFC show, and then, God, you guys are going to be back like 3 nights in a row.
Yeah, UFC and then AEW. AEW, we should actually talk a little bit about the AEW show. It's a really interesting, because most of the time when there's an AEW pay-per-view, I'll look at it and go like, this show's going to be awesome, because there's so many good matches to where it's kind of like, even if somebody has a bad match, like everybody else will pick up the slack. And this one probably will, AEW's only had one pay-per-view that wasn't great. The rest of them have all been great. It feels to me, and of course, because it's Omega and Moxley involved, that I just feels to me that they're not going to blow it with the explosives. It feels like that they've thought it out, and they're, I hope they have, because you're going to get the effort, and you're going to go, like, you're going to have a big explode. The whole thing is at the 30-minute mark, they're going to blow up the ring. And so they're going to have to go 30 minutes. So, that's going to be a weird spectacle. The Young Bucks match, so they're going to open with that. I mean, look, the Young Bucks, like, never have a bad pay-per-view match. I think it's impossible. So that'll be good. Paige and Hardy, again, Hardy in a singles match can be tough. I think that Shida and Mizunami are going to tear the house down. But I don't know that the house will know that, but I think that they're going to have a great match, because that's what they're there for. You know what I mean? Like, their real Mizunami is not over, and she's not, you know what I mean? She was put there to have this killer match with Shida. Ladder match will be wild. Surprise guy. Tag team battle royal, Casino Royal. I mean, there's a lot of talent in that Casino Royal. So this is their chance to, like, really make that one good. And Sting, Darby Allin's great, and Ricky Starks is really good, and Brian Cage can do a million things, and Sting is Sting, it's like he doesn't have to do a lot to get over because he's Sting. I think that, but yeah, it's, it'll probably be real entertaining. But again, like, between, the key draws are, does the explosive barbed wire thing work in the United States as a draw? We don't know. It's never been done on a major league level. The surprise, those, there is a lot of talk I don't know that the people who only care about the surprise probably won't buy it because you can just follow it on the internet and get that. Mm-hmm. But the explosive barbed wire, if you're intrigued by that, you would probably buy the show. So, I don't know what Sunday going against the All-Star game means.
I think they're going head to head with the actual All-Star game. And the All-Star game's got a little bit of a lead in because they're doing the 3-point shootout the hour before the All-Star game.
So not the night before.
No. And then at halftime, they're doing the dunk contest. So they may get that hardcore NBA fan base from like 3:30 all the way through the end of the game, or maybe after the slam dunk contest. The game is not that important because the players don't take it too seriously, but this is an experiment on their end too, to sort of see how long they can keep viewers, because to have the 3-point shootout, then the game,
so
then the slam dunk contest.
Why did they do it the night before like usual?
I don't know. I do know that having the All-Star weekend was, I don't know. I don't think it was a last minute decision, but it wasn't really scheduled. Like, I think the whole way the season has gone is originally, I think they were going to take like a 2-week break during the season, for the All-Star break to kind of let the players, mentally kind of, deal with stuff. But I think probably because of all the canceled games and a lot of the changes that they had to make, they just kept the season going. And I'm sure, this has to do with TNT, making their money through ad sales and stuff too, because this is their big event. Like, they don't actually get the finals. They get like some of the playoffs and then the All-Star game, and then ABC gets the finals. So this is kind of like their big deal. Yeah.
It's interesting because I talked to Tony, and Tony's feeling is that it was a better, it was better for them to go into the All-Star game than go against the UFC, a UFC pay-per-view show. So that was the mentality behind it. Now, the UFC pay-per-view show is a pay-per-view show, and it's a big show. The All-Star game still has more appeal, but does that crossover with AEW? And, my gut is that the All-Star game's going to cross over to AEW, because when you have, when you have that level of an attraction, but he didn't want to go against a strong UFC. I mean, that was the reason they moved to Sunday.
I can definitely see that.
Yeah,
I can definitely see that. I guess the other thing is, I don't know what. And
also, it's also, what does Sting's first match in AEW mean? Like, he's been on TV so many times that I don't know that there's no novelty left of Sting just being on TV. But, so that's a potential hook. But the barbed wire is to me like the key. Like, if it does really, really well, I'm going to say that it's the barbed wire more than anything. Because I don't think that, like I said, the surprise is something that you can just go on Twitter and you're going to get it a second later anyway. So who cares? You don't need to spend $50 if that's all you care about. And, I don't, again, I don't know, because it's never been, extreme stipulations that have never been done often do very well on pay-per-view, but this is a different generation than before. And, it doesn't mean as much as it would have. Like, if they had done this, put it this way, if this match with this stipulation was done in the 1980s in Jim Crockett Promotions or Mid-South Wrestling, it would draw huge. Because those kind of stips, first time ever, that would, War Games, scaffold, whatever, weird cages and stuff. That's the stuff that used to draw back then. Today, it's a different fan base. I don't know what it means. It's an experiment what it means. And then the other experiment is Saturday versus Sunday. We don't know. AEW has never run on Sunday. Is that a difference maker? I mean, I would think it wouldn't be, But it's you just don't know, because when you move days, I would think with AEW it won't be, because when AEW has moved days, because of basketball and everything, they do get a lot of their audience moving over. Not the whole audience, but they get more than you would expect that they would get. So they have a very loyal fan base when it comes to that. Especially when you're talking about 100,000. Like if it's 1 million, it's not so loyal, but that 100,000 key audience, that's pretty loyal. So I don't think that the day should matter. I think that at the end of the day, it's the competition of the NBA game and how strong the card is for the average wrestling fan.
Yep. Okay, so that's it from here. So for Dave, I am Garrett. To everybody, thanks for listening.